Hey, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Happy Sunday. Oh my gosh. This is the Sunday Brunch Book Club. We do not have brunch with us because we couldn't wait to eat, so we ate it before we got here. But we do have our coffee mugs with us.
Cheers.
Yes, cheers. This will help us greatly get through this. Uh, Yum, love coffee.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Austin, and this is
McKenna.
McKenna. Today we are going to be reading, or starting to read, Always Running. This is a book that I picked up in high school. It's actually one of our required reading in high school, one of the high schools that I attended. It's written by Luis J. Rodriguez. He is a former gang member, grew up in central Los Angeles. This book is an autobiography about his life as a gang member. Sorry, one sec here while I adjust this. Anyways, I don't want to give any spoilers. I never finished the book in high school. I just read up to, well, I think a few chapters before the end. So let us begin.
Cheer.
I'm very excited about this. We'll actually get through it this time.
And also, if you guys have anything to say in the live chat, I will be monitoring it, so feel free to always pipe in.
Yeah, please. All right, we're gonna start. We're gonna skip over all the prefaces and the new intro by the author. We're going to go right into chapter 1, so we can skip all that stuff. Plus, it kind of gives away a little bit of his story in the preface and the new intro, so we'll just get right into the actual story. All right, here we go. Top of the page is a quote: "Cry, child, for those without tears have a grief which never ends." It is a Mexican saying. All right, first part of the chapter. This memory begins with flight. A 1950s Bondo spackled Dodge surged through a driving rain, veering around the potholes and upturned tracks of the abandoned Red Line trains on Alameda. Now, for those of you that don't know what Bondo is, that's it's an adhesive. So it's an adhesive spackled Dodge vehicle. Mama was in the front seat. My father was at the wheel. My brother Reno and I sat on one end of the back seat. My sisters Pata and Kuka on the other. There was a space between the boys and girls to keep us apart. Ama, mira a Reno, meaning look at, it's probably Reno actually. Mira a Reno, meaning look at Reno. A voice said for the 10th time from the back of the car, "He's hitting me again." We fought all the time. My brother, especially, had it in for Lapata, thinking of Frankenstein. He called her Anna Stein. Her real name was Anna, but most of the time, we went by the animal names Dad gave us at birth. I am Grio, which means cricket. Reno stands for Rana, the frog. La Pata is the duck. And Kuka is short for cucaracha, or cockroach. The car seats came apart in strands. I looked out at the passing cars, which seemed like ghosts with headlights rushing past the streaks of water on the glass. I was 9 years old. As the rain fell, my mother cursed in Spanish, intermixed with pleas to saints and La Santísima Madre de Dios, which means, "Oh dear mother of mine." She argued with my father. Dad didn't curse or raise his voice. He just stated the way things were. "I'll never go back to Mexico," he said. "I'd rather starve here. You want to stay with me? It has to be in Los Angeles. Otherwise, go." This incited my mother to greater fits. We were on the way to the Union train station in downtown LA. We had our few belongings stuffed into the trunk, and underneath our feet, there's a period there. I gently held on to one of the comic books Mama bought to keep us entertained. I had on my Sunday best clothes with chewed gum in a coat pocket. It could have been Easter, but it was a weeping November. I don't remember for sure why we were leaving. I just knew it was a special day. There was no fear or concern on my part. We were always moving. I looked at the newness of the comic book and felt some exhilaration of its feels in my hand. Mama had never bought us comics before. It had to be a special day. For months, we had been pushed from one house to another, just Mama and us children. Mom and Dad had split up prior to this. We stayed at the homes of women my mom called comadres, or godmothers, with streams of children of their own. Some nights, we slept in a car or in the living rooms of people we didn't know. There were no shelters for homeless families. My mother tried to get us settled somewhere, but all indications pointed to our going back to the land of her birth, to her red earth, her Mexico. The family consisted of my father Alfonso, my mom Maria Estela, my older brother Jose Rene, and my younger sisters Anna Virginia and Gloria Estela. I recall my father with his wavy hair and clean-shaven face, his correct, upright, and stubborn demeanor, in contrast to my mother who was heavy-set with native features and thick, straight hair, often laughing heartily, her eyes narrowed to slits, and sometimes crying from a deep, tomb-like place, with a sound like swallowing mud. What a descriptor there. As we got closer to the Union Station, Los Angeles loomed low and large, a city of odd construction, a good place to get lost in. I, however, would learn to hide in imaginative worlds, in books, in TV shows where I picked up much of my English, in solitary play with mangled army men and crumpled toy trucks. I was so withdrawn, it must have looked scary. Man. When he describes LA as a city of odd construction, it really is. I mean, growing up and I grew up just outside of Los Angeles, and even just going into the city, that's exactly what it was. It's just always under construction.
Mm-hmm.
It still is today. I mean, there's construction everywhere in Los Angeles. It's just a mess. But anyways, continuing on. This is what I know. When I was 2 years old, our family left Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, for Los Angeles. My father was an educated man, unusual for a border town, a hunger city filled to the hills with the cardboard hovels of former peasants, Indians, and dusk-faced children. In those days, an educated man had to be careful about certain things. Questioning authority, for example. Although the principal of a local high school, my father failed to succumb to the local chieftains who were linked to the National Party which ruled Mexico. As one famous Latin American writer would later say, with a perfect dictatorship. When Dad first became principal, there were no funds due to the massive bureaucratic maze he had to get through to get them. The woman he lived with then was an artist who helped raise money for the school by staging exhibitions. My father used his own money to pay for supplies and at one point had the iron fence around the school torn down and sold for scrap. Oof. One year, Dad received an offer for a 6-month study program for foreign teachers in Bloomington, Indiana. He liked it so much he renewed it 3 times. By then, my father had married his secretary, my mother, after the artist left him. They had their first child, Jose Rene. By the time my father returned, his enemies had mapped out a means to remove him. Being a high school principal is a powerful position in a place like Ciudad Juarez. My father faced a pile. God, if I can speak. My father faced a pile of criminal charges, including the alleged stealing of school funds. Police arrived at the small room in the vecindad, where Mama and Dad lived, and escorted him to the city jail. Now, what's great about this book is there's a lot of Spanish words that are in here, but there's a glossary in the back that has a bunch of Spanish words. So let's go. Vecindad. If it doesn't mean vicinity, what's it say?
A complex of linked homes around a common courtyard, widespread in parts of Mexico and the Southwest.
Well, there you have it. That's what a vecindad is.
It's almost like a townhome in a sense.
Kind of like a townhome.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like. Okay. Where Mama and Dad lived and escorted him to the city jail. For months, my father fought the charges. While he was locked up, they fed him scraps of food and a rusted steel can. They denied him visitors. Mama had to climb a section of prison wall and pick up 2-year-old Jose Rene so he could see his father. Finally, after a lengthy trial, my father was found innocent, but he no longer had his position as principal. Dad became determined to escape in the United States. My mother, on the other hand, never wanted to leave Mexico. She did it to be with Dad. Mama was one of 2 daughters in a family run by a heavy-drinking, wife-beating railroad worker and musician. My mother was the only one in her family to complete high school. Her brothers, Kiko and Rodolfo, often crossed the border to find work and came back with stories of love and brawls on the other side. Their grandmother was a Tarahumara Indian who once walked down from the mountainous area in the state of Chihuahua where her people lived in seclusion for centuries. The Spanish never conquered them, but their grandmother never returned to her people. She eventually gave birth to my grandmother, Ana Acosta. Anna's first husband was a railroad worker during the Mexican Revolution. He lost his life when a tunnel exploded during a raid. They brought his remains in a shoebox-sized container. Anna was left alone with 1 son while pregnant with a daughter. Lucita, the daughter, eventually died of convulsions at the age of 4, and Manolo, the son, was later blinded after a bout with a deadly form of chickenpox which struck and killed many children in the area. Later, Anna married my grandfather, Monaco Jimenez, who, like her first husband, worked the railroads. At one point, Monaco quit the rails to play trumpet and sing for bands in various nightclubs. Once he ended up in Los Angeles, but with another woman. In fact, Monaco had many other women. My grandmother often had to cross over to the railroad yards, crowded with prostitutes, and where Monaco spent many nights singing to bring him home. When my parents married, Mama was 27, Dad almost 40. She had never known any other man. He already had 4 or 5 children from 3 or 4 other women. She was an emotionally charged border woman, full of fire, full of pain, full of giving love. He was a stoic, unfeeling, unmoved intellectual who did as he pleased, as much as she did all she could to please him. This dichotomous couple, this sun and moon, this Corandra, and biologist, dreamer, and realist, firewoman and water man molded me. These two sides created a lifelong conflict in my breast. Now, curandera.
A Mexican healer often linked with magic and native Catholic beliefs.
Okay. That's how they're describing the relationship.
Oh, okay. I get it now. Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So someone more mystical and one more, like, factual based.
Yeah, that's really funny. They have terms for everything. By the time Dad had to leave Ciudad Juarez, my mother had borne 3 of his children, including myself, all in El Paso on the American side. Gloria was born later in East LA's General Hospital. This was done to help ease the transition from alien status to legal residency. There are stories of women who wait up to the 9th month and run across the border to have their babies, sometimes squatting and dropping them on the pavement as they hug the closest lamppost. Oh, ouch. I mean, that's tough. I mean, you just want your child to be born like on the American side so they're a citizen.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what happens to you as long as they have a good life, or hopefully a good life. We ended up in Watts, a community primarily of Black people except for La Colonia, often called the Quarter, the Mexican section and the oldest part of Watts. Now, Watts, I've driven through Watts, and Watts is not a place you want to stop. That's a place that you roll up to a red light or a stop sign, and your car gets surrounded, and they take your hubcaps.
Oh my god!
It's like that's a joke, but it is that dangerous. You don't really want to stop there.
Is it closer to downtown or?
It is closer to downtown. It's like I can't remember if it's on the south side or it's on the north side. In either case, yeah.
Okay.
Watts is a dangerous area, except for the housing projects. Watts was a ghetto where country and city mixed. The homes were mostly single-family units made of wood and stucco. Open windows and doors served as air conditioners, a slight relief from the summer desert air. Chicken coops graced many a backyard, along with broken auto parts. Roosters crowded the morning to birth, and an occasional goat peered from weather-worn picket fences, along with millions of dogs, which seemed to populate the neighborhood. So that's pretty good imagery of what Watts looks like, or what it looked like back then. You could still find chickens in backyards and dogs roaming the streets, that's for sure. I've seen it.
Sounds like Mexico.
Yep. Watts fed into one of the largest industrial concentrations in the country, pulling from an almost endless sea of cheap labor. They came from Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Arkansas, from Chihuahua, Sonora, Sinaloa, and Nayarit. If you moved there, it was because the real estate concerns pushed you in this direction. For decades, LA was notorious for restrictive covenants, which some areas were off limits to undesirables, quote unquote, undesirables. Despite the competition for jobs and housing, we found common ground there among the rolling mills, bucket shops, and foundries. All day long, we heard the pounding of forges and the air whistles that signaled the shift changes in the factories, which practically lay in our backyards. Wow. We moved to Watts at the behest of my oldest sister, really a half-sister who was already married with 2 children of her own. Her family eventually joined us a few months later. Her name was Seni, a name my father invented, although rumor has it was an inversion of the name Inez, an old girlfriend of his. The name, however, has stayed in the family. Seni's first daughter was named Anna Seni, and in later years, one of Anna Seni's daughters became Seni Bia. When Seni was a child, my father often left her for long intervals with my grandmother Katita, whom she called Mama Piri. One family legend tells of a 9-year-old Seni answering the door during a pouring rain. A man with soaked hat and coat stood at the doorway. Seni yelled out, Mama Piri, Mama Piri. There's a strange man at the door. Don't worry, Mija, Katita said. He's only your father. Seni lived in several rentals in Watts until she found a 2-story on a 111th Street near a block of factories. The place later got razed to build Locke High School. I stayed there a couple of summers sleeping in a cobweb-infested attic with exposed 2x4 studs. Rats and cockroaches roamed freely in that house. Huge rats, huge cockroaches. Seni would place a chair at the bottom of the attic steps, and she convinced me it would ward off the creatures. I believed it until one night I noticed the chair was gone. The chair was gone. Oh, that's good. I ran down to tell Seni, but she yelled back in Spanish, Go back to bed. That chair couldn't keep nothing away, and only a fool would believe it. Ouch. I was devastated.
Yep.
Yeah, as a kid, I probably would be too. Seni was my father's daughter from one of his earlier relationships. Her mother died giving birth to her. My father was handsome and athletic as a young man. He was a pole vaulting champion at one of the schools he attended, but his looks apparently got him into a lot of trouble. His father, Cristobal, then a general in the Mexican army, once disowned him when Dad fell for a woman and neglected his studies in medical school. Dad quit school to be with the woman who would later become Seni's mother. I also had 2 older half-brothers, Alberto and Mario. All right, so the family tree is growing. Got a lot of names to keep track of. Who lived in Mexico. Another half-sister, Lisa, died as an infant after she accidentally ate some chicharrones my father was forced to sell on cobblestone streets in Mexico City after his father cut him off. Now, chicharrones, I think that's the fried pigskin, I believe is what it is.
Is that what it is?
Chicharrones, yeah.
Let's see.
I'm almost
Mexican style pork rinds. Yep.
Yep. Okay. My mother kept a sepia-colored black and white death photo of Lisa in a white lace baptism dress, looking like a doll, looking asleep, so peaceful as she lay in a tiny wood coffin. Oh, that's sad. Our first exposure in America stays with me like a foul odor. It seemed a strange world, most of it spiteful to us, spitting and stepping on us, coughing us up, us immigrants, as if we were phlegm stuck in the collective throat of this country. My father was mostly out of work. When he did have a job, it was in construction, in factories such as Sinclair Paints or Standard Brands dog food, or pushing doorbells selling insurance, Bibles, or pots and pans. My mother found work cleaning homes or in a garment industry. She knew the corner markets were ripping her off, but she could only speak with her hands and in choppy English. Once my mother gathered up the children and we walked to Will Rogers Park. There were people everywhere. Mama looked around for a place we could rest. She spotted an empty spot on a dark bench, but as soon as she sat down, an American woman with 3 kids of her own came by. Hey, get out of here. Or get out of there. That's our seat. My mother understood, but didn't know how to answer back in English, so she tried in Spanish. Look, Spick, you can't sit there, the American woman yelled. You don't belong here. Understand? This is not your country. Mama quietly got our things and walked away, but I knew frustration and anger bristled within her because she was unable to talk, and when she did, no one would listen. Man,
That's sad.
that sucks. So I think that's the first racist incident that they've come across in this book.
Yeah.
I'm sure that won't be the last. We never stopped crossing borders. The Rio Grande, or Rio Bravo, which is what the Mexicans call it, giving the name a power Rio Grande doesn't have, was only the first of countless barriers set in our path. We kept jumping hurdles, kept breaking from the constraints, kept evading the border guards of every new trek. It was a metaphor to fill our lives. That river, that first crossing, the mother of all crossings. The LA River, for example, became a new barrier keeping the Mexicans in their neighborhoods over on the vast east side of the city for years, except for forays downtown. Schools provided other restrictions. Don't speak Spanish, don't be Mexican. You don't belong. Railroad tracks divided us from communities where white people lived, such as Southgate or Linwood, across from Watts. We were invisible people in a city which thrived on glitter, big screens, and big names, but this glamour contained none of our names, none of our faces. The refrain, "This is not your country," echoed for a lifetime. Man. All right, so they're finding it pretty rough. They're a rough life. America is not exactly what they wanted. They're able to find work, they're able to find jobs, but it sounds like they can't keep them for long. They can't keep their kids in school, and And no matter what they try to do, they try to go to better neighborhoods to hang out and whatever, but they're just not
Chased
welcome.
out, basically.
Yeah, they're chased out. So they're not having a great life here in America so far. And I think maybe their mom was right in thinking that she didn't want to go to America, and not wanting to follow dad to the great United States. But
Mm-hmm.
they're trying their best to make it work for them and their children.
Right. I mean, it was basically like the decision that they had to make was pick from one of the two worst options and stuff. It's like
Right.
stay in Mexico where we're going to be chased for the rest of our lives, and also our kids are more susceptible to being able to falling into a crime world, where potentially in America, at least we have a chance of being able to get out of it. But basically, they just moved to another part of America where it's just Mexico 2.0.
Yeah.
So they just, no matter what, couldn't escape it.
Yeah, and it didn't sound like they had too much of a great life in Mexico either. They were probably making a little bit more money.
Well,
I guess considering how much money you can make in Mexico as a teacher and.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially since he also lost his job as a principal after all those like fake charges against him and stuff like that. That basically just like doomed them to never being able to get their feet off the ground then again. So
it's either stay poor in Mexico or try to have a better life in America.
So I mean, they made the right decision for what they knew, at least at the time, but doesn't come with its hardships, as we can see.
As we are clearly seeing, they are struggling.
Did you, I wrote this down just like as a question mark on the Rio Grande versus the Rio Bravo, and the Bravo having like a more impactful name.
Mm-hmm.
Did you understand that?
No, but we can see what Bravo means in Spanish.
It might say here in the glossary.
Let's see. Spanish to English.
Nope, it's not in here. Oh wait, Rio Grande, Rio Bravo, a river which partly serves as a borderline between the U.S. and Mexico. Okay, so that doesn't really explain what the difference is as to.
Yeah, that's okay.
Why that name hasn't.
I'm not finding what it means in Spanish either, but in either case, so instead of calling it the Grand River, they call it. But it doesn't give me an extra definition for Bravo. There.
That's okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on. Although we moved around the Watts area, the house on 105th Street near McKinley Avenue held my earliest memories, my earliest fears and questions. All right. So he's starting to, now they're kind of settling in here. This is going to be the start of his, probably his, well, I guess we'll see. I don't want to give anything away.
Mm-hmm.
It was a small matchbox of a place. Next to it stood a tiny garage with holes through the walls and an unpainted barn-like quality. The weather battered it into a leaning shed. The backyard was a jungle. Vegetation appeared to grow down from the sky. There were banana trees, huge sperm weeds, named that because they stunk like semen when you cut them. I've definitely run into these before, and they smell like semen. Foxtails and yellowed grass. An avocado tree grew in the middle of the yard, and its roots covered every bit of ground, tearing up cement walks, while its branches scraped the bedroom windows. A sway of clothes on some lines filled the little bit of grassy area just behind the house. Wow. So they're living in a shoebox, basically, and what little yard they have is taken up by a giant tree, which tore up cement, the ground. They don't have anything to play around with in the backyard, and it just seems like a jungle back there.
Yeah. It's interesting though, like the terminology that he's using. While it also, part of it sounds like complete crap and like not necessarily like a good living situation at all. Some of the way he's just like describing it almost just sounds interesting and almost like kind of like pretty in a sense as well, where it's just like the imagery that he's using. It almost just like sounds partially lovely, but also not at the same time.
Right. I think him as a kid probably sees it as, something kind of like he's like awestruck by it almost.
Yeah. The kid imagination is just like, oh, look at this jungle basically I have in my backyard.
Yeah. But writing it here as an adult, it feels just dingy and
like a lot of work.
Like a lot of work.
Because like specifically like on a sway of clothes on some linens that sounds like almost like magical to me, where it's just like, just like kind of like just lovely linens just like swaying in the breeze or whatever.
Mhm.
That's just lovely sounding.
Yeah. But again, a testament as to how poor they are.
Yes.
Ugh. And I don't know back then, I don't think it was real popular. It was like the thing to air dry your clothes outside on a clothesline. Unless you like absolutely had to. But I think that also might be just it could be a cultural thing too.
It could be, but also I think, I mean, given so this takes place during the early 90s, right?
Yeah, so they had washing machines. They had
Okay.
I would imagine they probably also had laundromats.
So that is more than likely a class thing then.
Yeah.
More than
Actually, this might
anything.
is this the early 90s? I think this might be I think this is the 80s.
When he's a kid,
Yeah, I think this is
probably.
the 80s, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah. All right, moving on. My brother and I played often in our jungle. There it is.
Mhm.
Even pretending to be Tarzan. Reno mastered the Tarzan yell from the movies. The problem, however, was I usually ended up being the monkey who got thrown off the trees. In fact, I remember my brother as the most dangerous person alive. He seemed to be racked with a scream which never let out. His face was dark with meanness, what my mother called maldad. He also took delight in seeing me writhe in pain, cry or cower, vulnerable to his own inflated sense of power. Maldad.
Meanness.
Meanness. Got it. This hunger for cruelty included his ability to take my mom's most wicked whippings without crying or wincing. He'd just sit there and stare at a wall, forcing Mama to resort to other implements of pain. But Reno would not show any emotion. I wonder if Reno is going to be someone he looks up to at some point.
I don't think so. He already seems to be casting a shadow
He's,
from him.
He's certainly casting a shadow, but I'm wondering
Because especially with like saying like his face was dark with meanness, what
Mhm.
my mother called Maldad. But like he's casting him as a dark character and almost in his life, at least from like a young childhood. It's more than just like a standard sibling rivalry or whatever, you know, the younger brother to the older brother and all that kind of stuff and the torment that you guys cause each other.
Mhm.
This is just like my brother hurt me.
Yeah, it's like almost in those movies, if you want more imagery for that. Like when the character's laying on the ground and then the evil character, walks up to them and like now they're above them and blocking out the sun. And it's just this like shadowed, face. It's kind of like that.
I'm curious. I mean, given obviously this is like actually a biography and this is all based off of real events, I'm curious to see if there's almost like a Cain and Abel type of thing from this. Like, I'd be curious to see how that develops.
Yeah, I'm wondering.
You started page 21.
No, yeah, I'm looking over here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure that we can hear it, that we haven't been going for 27 minutes.
I'll check.
Perfect. Audio's good.
Good.
I was looking over there and I didn't see any levels jumping, so it scared me a little bit.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. Yet in the streets, neighborhood kids often chased Reno from play or jumped him. Many times he came home mangled, his face swollen. Once somebody threw a rock at him which cut a gash across his forehead, leaving a scar Reno has to this day. Okay. So the neighborhood kids aren't great. Another time, a neighbor's kid smashed a metal bucket over Reno's head, slicing the skin over his skull, and creating a horrifying scene with blood everywhere. My mother, in her broken English, could remedy few of the injustices, but she tried. When this one happened, she ran next door to confront that kid's mother. The woman had been sitting on her porch and saw everything. ¿Qué pasó aquí? Mama asked. I don't know what you want, the woman said. All I know is your boy picked up that bucket and hit himself over the head. That's all I know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
In school, they placed Reno in classes with retarded children because he didn't speak much English. They even held him back a year in the 2nd grade. For all this, Reno took his rage out on me. I recall hiding from him when he came around looking for a playmate. My mother actually forced me out of closets with a belt in her hand and made me play with him. One day we were playing on the rooftop of our house. Grillo, come over here, he said from the roof's edge. Man, look at this on the ground. I should have known better, but I leaned over to see. Reno then pushed me and I struck the ground on my back with a loud thump and lost my breath, laying deathly still in suffocating agony until I slowly gained it back. All right, so his brother is becoming excessively violent.
He's abusive.
Yeah, because of the outside, because of the environment he's growing up in.
Mm-hmm.
So we can see how, or maybe, the abuse that he's suffering from his brother, how that might translate into his later life.
Yes.
Whether he wants to better himself or he's going to use that rage and anger to further his life and make those decisions in his life, whether they be good or bad.
Yeah. Well, another thing that I'm also finding interesting, at least from the beginning of this new section that we're in, page 20 to now 21, is he hasn't brought up his dad at all.
Right. It's all about his mother and his brother.
So yeah, it's just his mother and his brother, which makes me wonder if his father isn't here for any of this abuse and he isn't witnessing any of this. And I guarantee that plays a big part into it, because as soon as like the father is not really in the picture or whatever, and so it's not that he isn't there, but he's not a presence, at least during all of these. So that does lead to some rebellion, because obviously a mother can't necessarily control a boy's hostility and stuff, just like the natural innate.
Yeah, but she's also forcing him to play with him.
Right.
Which is like, does she know about what's going on?
Probably
Has she seen it?
Or she doesn't understand how bad it is. If she knows it, she might just think it's a, standard brother sibling, like brother to brother rivalry. It might just be that's what she's seeing all that is.
Boys will be boys.
Because yeah, exactly. So she might not understand how actually bad it is.
Yeah. All right, well, let's find out how bad it could be. Another time, he made me the Indian to his cowboy, tossed a rope around my neck, and pulled me around the yard. He stopped barely before it choked the life out of me. I had rope burns around my neck for a week. Oof.
God.
Okay, this kind of reminds me, has nothing to do with this book or anything, but there's one time I was flying a kite with one of my cousins. We were flying a kite, and it was up in the air. She was watching it. I think my brother was around too. I can't remember, but in other case, the wind like picked it up as we were running with this kite, and it wrapped around my neck.
Oh my God!
That thin string, and it like wrapped around my neck, and I had those scars for probably for about a week. Not the scars, but you know what I'm talking about, like
the injury.
Yeah, the injury, the marks, probably for about a week. And I would tell people, because at that time the what do you say, Bloody Mary in the mirror, or like Candyman. So I told them that I did the Candyman thing in the mirror, and Candyman came out and got my throat.
How old were you?
I had to have been like maybe 11.
Got it. Okay.
12. Yeah. So I told people that Candyman.
Wow. I never did Candyman. I only ever did Bloody Mary.
Yeah, Bloody Mary was fun. His abuse even prompted neighborhood kids to get in on it. Oh, awesome. One older boy used to see how Reno tore into me. One day, he peered over the fence, separating his yard from ours.
Oh.
Hey, little dude. Yeah, you. Come over here a minute, he said. I got something to show you. This time, I approached with caution. Little good that did me. I stepped into a loop of rope on the ground. He pulled on it and dragged me through the weeds and foxtails up the splintery fence and tied it down on his side. I hung upside down, kicking and yelling for what seemed like hours until somebody came and cut me down.
Aww.
Oh, boy. Yeah, all right, so the neighborhood's turning on him now, too.
Hung up upside down for what seemed like hours.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Yeah. So the neighbor, not only is his family against him, his brother, but the neighborhood is now against him. Perfect. All right. The house on 105th Street stayed cold. We couldn't always pay the gas or light bills. When we couldn't, we used candles. We cleaned up the dishes and the table where we ate without any light, whispering because that's what people do in the dark. We took baths in cold water, and I remember wanting to run out of the bathroom as my mother murmured a shiver of words to comfort me. Así es, así será, she explained as she dunked me into the frigid bath. Así. I think así is like, okay. It's okay.
This is how it is. This is how it's going to be.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Aww.
So just accepting that, yeah, their fate, basically. This is how life is going to be, so get used to it.
Ouch.
One night, my parents decided to take us to a restaurant since we had no heat to cook anything with. We drove around for a while. On Avalon Boulevard, we found one of those all-night ham, egg, and coffee places. As we pulled up, I curled up in the seat. No, I don't want to go in, I yelled. And why not, my mother demanded. Por el amor de Dios, aren't you hungry? So, por el amor de Dios means for the love of God.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for the love of God, aren't you hungry? I pointed out a finger to a sign on the door. It read, come in, cold inside. Christmases came with barely a whimper. Once my parents bought a fake aluminum tree, placed some presents beneath it, and woke us up early to open them up. At least they're trying.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the wrappings, though, had been haphazardly put together because Reno had sneaked into the living room in the middle of the night and torn them open to take a peek. The presents came from a church group. Okay, I've done this before. Church group which gave out gifts for the poor. It was our first Christmas. That day, I broke the plastic submarine, toy gun, and metal car I received. I don't know why. I suppose in my mind it didn't seem right to have things that were in working order, unspent.
Jeez.
So I've done that before. My mom used to work at a hospital. Well, she still works at a hospital, but she used to work at another hospital. And every Christmas we would do a toy or canned food drive, and we'd go door to door in the neighborhood around the hospital, and we would give the kids presents and the family food.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, so I'm glad to see that was a thing then too for them. They could kind of rely on that for the holidays.
Yeah, especially for the parents, because I mean, I know how hard that must be for a parent to
Not
look
be
at
able
your
to-
young children and say, I don't really know what to give you. I don't really have anything to be able to give you. So at least having that as a resource to help through the holidays is really nice to them, even though it is quite tragic that what he just said there is, I suppose in my mind, it didn't seem right to have things that were in working order.
Mhm.
That's really tragic.
Yeah.
This poor kid. Yeah. He never established how old he is here, did he?
I don't think he did.
Okay. But
No.
he's young.
Yeah, he's young. My mother worked on and off primarily as a costurera, or cleaning homes, or taking care of other people's children. We sometimes went with her to the houses she cleaned. They were nice American white people homes. What's a costurera?
Garment worker.
Okay. I remember one had a swimming pool and a fireplace and a thing called rugs. As Mama swept and scrubbed and vacuumed, we played in the corner, my sisters and I, afraid to touch anything. The odor of these houses was different, full of fragrances, sweet and nauseating. On 105th Street, the smells were of fried lard, of beans and car fumes, of factory smoke and homemade brew out of backyard stills. There were chicken smells and goat smells and grassless yards filled with engine parts and wire and wood planks, cracked and sprinkled with rusty nails. These were the familiar aromas, the funky earth, animal, and mechanical smells which were absent from the homes my mother cleaned. Mama always seemed to be sick. For one thing, she was overweight and suffered from a form of diabetes. She had thyroid problems, bad nerves, and high blood pressure. She was still young then in Watts, in her 30s, but she had all these ailments. She didn't even have teeth. They rotted away many years before. This made her look much older until later when she finally obtained false ones. Despite this, she worked all the time, chased after my brother with a belt or a board, and held up the family when almost everything else came apart. All right, so she's clearly running the household here. So I'm wondering where Dad is.
Yeah, exactly. The first hint towards him was over Christmas on my parents.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything has been about the mother.
He's either just working all the time, or working and out drinking, or just out drinking.
Yeah, or with
other women.
Yeah, exactly.
Heavy blue veins streak across my mother's legs. All right, here we go. So this is getting into some graphicness. I remember this part. I remember reading this part the first time, and I was like, "Oh, that is so graphic." Anyways, all right.
Oh, great.
Heavy blue veins streak across my mother's legs, some of them bunched up into dark lumps at her ankles. Mama periodically bleeds them to relieve the pain. She carefully cuts the engorged veins with a razor and drains them into porcelain-like metal pail called a tina. I'm small, and all I remember are dreams of blood, me drowning in a red sea, blood on sheets, on the walls, splashing against the white pail in streams out of my mother's ankle. But they aren't dreams. It is Mama bleeding. Into day, into night. Bleeding a birth of memory, my mother, my blood, by the side of the bed, me on the covers, and her slicing into a black vein and filling the pail into some dark, forbidden red nightmare, which never stops coming, never stops pouring, this memory of Mama and blood and Watts. So she's got she probably has, what is that called? Not varicose veins, but maybe it's varicose veins that she has to bleed every so often to relieve the pain and the pressure.
Oh.
Yeah,
well, I mean, because he said that. I wonder if that's from a form of diabetes.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely in high blood pressure and stuff, so she
Mhm.
definitely has some pretty significant health issues.
Yeah, and she's taking care of it herself because she can't afford health care
Oh my
or to get it taken
God.
care of by a doctor.
And she works too. Like what a trooper of a woman.
Yeah. One day, my mother asked Reno and me to go to the grocery store. We decided to go across the railroad tracks into Southgate. In those days, Southgate was an Anglo neighborhood, filled with the families of workers from the auto plant and other nearby industry. Like Linwood or Huntington Park, it was forbidden territory for the people of Watts. My brother insisted we go. I don't know what possessed him, but then I never did. It was useless to argue. He'd forced me anyway. He was 9 then. There we go. I was 6. So, without ceremony, we started over the tracks, climbing over discarded market carts and tore up sofas across Alameda Street into Southgate, all white, all American. We entered the first small corner grocery store we found. Everything was cool at first. We bought some bread, milk, soup cans, and candy. We each walked out with a bag filled with food. We barely got a few feet, though, when 5 teenagers on bikes approached. We tried not to pay attention and proceeded to our side of the tracks, but the youths pulled up in front of us. While 2 of them stood nearby on the bikes, 3 of them jumped off theirs and walked over to us. "What have we got here?" one of the boys said. "Spicks to order, maybe with some beans." Oof. Talk about racism. Jesus. He pushed me to the ground. The groceries splattered on the asphalt. I felt melted gum and chips of broken beer bottle on my lips and cheek. Then somebody picked me up and held me while the others seized my brother, tossed his groceries out, and pounded on him. They punched him in the face, in the stomach, then his face again, cutting his lip, causing him to vomit. I remember the shrill, maddening laughter of one of the kids on the bike, this laughing like a raven's wail, a harsh wind shriek, a laugh that I would hear in countless beatings thereafter. I watched the others take turns on my brother, this terror of a brother, and he doubled over, had blood and spew on his shirt, and tears down his face. God.
This is brutal.
Crazy. I wanted to do something, but they held me, and I just looked on, as every strike against Reno opened me up inside. They finally let my brother go, and he slid to the ground like a rotten banana squeezed out of its peeling. They threw us back over the tracks in the sunset. Back over the tracks. In the sunset, I could see the Watts Towers, shimmers of 70,000 pieces of broken bottles, seashells, ceramic, and metal on spiraling points, puncturing the heavens, which reflected back the rays of a falling sun. So, for those of you unfamiliar, Watts Towers, I think it was like some like art piece, or they like made it into an artwork or something like that. It's like in Watts. Yeah, they like decorated it. It's supposed to be an art piece, I believe. Or at least yeah. We're looking it up now. Yeah. Watts Towers.
Oh, okay. Oof.
Yeah, it's not pretty by any means. Yeah.
Do you want to try to bring that up to the camera?
Yeah, let's see here. Let's see, this is what Watts Towers looks like. That's what it is there. It's not pretty. You can't really see any of the decoration.
But fascinating because I mean the way he's like describing it with the basically reflecting the light and all that kind of stuff. It sounds really pretty.
It sounds glamorous.
Yeah, it sounds like almost kind of like a beacon in a sense. Shining light, like to basically go home.
Right.
But seeing it actually is just like if that's your like saving grace, that piece of art, you know you've fallen.
Yeah, it's not pretty. Let me let this yawn out. Coffee's hitting hard. Just kidding, it's not hitting at all. My brother and I then picked ourselves up, saw the teenagers take off, still laughing, still talking about those stupid greasers who dared to cross over to Southgate. Up until then, my brother had never shown any emotion to me other than disdain. He had never asked me anything unless it was a demand, an expectation, an obligation to be his throwaway boy doll. But for this once, he looked at me, tears welled in his eyes, blood streamed from several cuts, lips and cheeks swollen. "Swear. You got to swear. You'll never tell anybody how I cried," he said. I suppose I did promise, but it was his one last thing to hang on to, his rep as someone who could take a belt whipping, who could take a beating in the neighborhood and still go back, risking more. It was this pathetic plea from the pavement I remember. I must have promised. It was a warm September day when my mother pulled me out of bed, handed me a pair of pants and a shirt, a piece of burnt toast, and dragged me by the arm toward 109th Street School. We approached a huge, dusky brick building with the school's name carved in ancient English lettering across the entrance. Mama hauled me up a row of steps and through 2 large doors. First day of school. Great. Well, that's some awakening, huh? I wonder if he knew it was first day of school. Seems like he did not.
No, it seemed to be kind of like a sudden, like, congrats, it's the rest of your life.
Yeah. I was 6 years old, never having gone to kindergarten because Mama wanted me to wait until La Pata became old enough to enter school. Mama filled out some papers. A school monitor directed us to a classroom where Mama dropped me off and left to join some parents who gathered in the main hall. The first day of school said a lot about my scholastic life to come. I was taken to a teacher who didn't know what to do with me. She complained about not having any room, about kids who didn't even speak the language. And how was she supposed to teach anything under these conditions? Although I didn't speak English, I understood a large part of what she was saying. I knew I wasn't wanted. She put me in an old creaky chair near the door. As soon as I could, I sneaked out to find my mother. I found Reno's class with the mentally disabled children instead, and decided to stay there for a while. Actually, it was fun. They treated me like I was everyone's little brother. But the teacher finally told the student to take me to the main hall. Oh, poor guy. After some more paperwork, I was taken to another class. This time, the teacher appeared nicer, but distracted. She got the word about my language problem. Got it. Okay, why don't you sit here in the back of the class, she said. Play with some blocks until we figure out how to get you more involved. Okay, so they clearly don't know how to deal with this at all.
No, which is shocking.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's the 80s, right? Or maybe at this point, yeah, probably like early 80s, because I think his, young adult life takes place in the 80s.
Yeah, because everything it's supposed to be before before 92.
Okay, so yeah, so this is like early 80s.
Yeah.
All right. It took her most of that year to figure this out. I just stayed in the back of the class, building blocks. It got so every morning I would put my lunch and my coat away and walk to my corner where I stayed the whole day long. It forced me to be more withdrawn. It got so bad, I didn't even tell anybody when I had to go to the bathroom. I did it in my pants.
Aww.
Oof. Soon I stunk back there in the corner, and the rest of the kids screamed out a chorus of PU, resulting in my being sent to the office or back home. In those days, there was no way to integrate with non-English speaking children, so they just made it a crime to speak anything but English. If a Spanish word sneaked into the playground, kids were often sent to the office to get swatted or to get detention. Teachers complained that maybe the children were saying bad things about them. An assumption of guilt was enough to get one punished. A day came when I finally built up the courage to tell the teacher I had to go to the bathroom. I didn't quite say all the words, but she got the message and promptly excused me, so I didn't do it while I was trying to explain. I ran to the bathroom and peed and felt good about not having that wetness trickle down my pants leg. But suddenly, several bells went on and off. I hesitantly stepped out of the bathroom and saw throngs of children leave their classes. I had no idea what was happening. I went to my classroom and it stood empty. I looked into other classrooms and found nothing. Nobody. I didn't know what to do. I really thought everyone had gone home. I didn't bother to look at the playground where the whole school had been assembled for the fire drill. I just went home. It got to be a regular thing there for a while, me coming home early until I learned the ins and outs of school life. Not speaking well makes for such embarrassing moments. I hardly asked questions. I just didn't want to be misunderstood. Many Spanish-speaking kids mangled things up. They would say things like, "Where the beer in cantaloupe roam," instead of "Where the deer in antelope roam." That's funny. That's the way it was with me. I mixed up all the words, screwed up all the songs. Eventually, I did make friends. My brother often brought home a one-armed Mexican kid named Jaime. Sometimes we all hung out together. Jaime lost his arm when he was a toddler. Somehow he managed to get the arm stuck in the wringer of one of those old washing machines which pulled out the clothes through 2 rollers. Oof. Yeah, that hurts. It tore his arm off at the socket.
Oh my god.
But later, he made up for it with soccer feet and even won a couple of fights with his one good arm. Way to go, Jaime.
What the heck?
And then there was Earl. I didn't really know him until one day when we lined up following recess. He pulled the trenzas of a Mexican girl in our class named Gabriela. I would imagine that's probably
Trousers? Pants?
trenzas. No, I'd imagine that's probably ponytail
Oh,
or like her something
braids.
to do with her braids.
That makes sense.
Of a Mexican girl in our class named Gabriela. We all liked Gabriela, but she was also quiet like me. So Earl pulled on her braids. There it is. The girl wailed, turned around, and saw me standing there. Just then, the teacher ran out of the classroom. Gabriella pointed in my direction, the one who never says anything. Because of this, I suffered through an hour's detention, fuming in my seat the whole time. Later that evening, Earl came to my sister's house where we were visiting. Senny answered the door and looked askance at him. Askance. That's probably one word I am unfamiliar with. So let's look it up. That's what we're going to do here. If we don't know a word, we're going to look it up. I know it, but I don't know the definition.
Yeah, it's like I've heard it, but I can't actually define it.
All right, askance. It's an adverb with suspicion, mistrust, or disapproval.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right.
Like, who the hell is this kid? What do you want? I want to know if the boy upstairs can play. I don't know. I don't think so. Tell him I got some marbles. If it's okay, I'd like him to play with me. I don't know. I don't think so. I looked down from the attic window and saw the tall, thin boy in striped shirt and blue jeans. Under an arm was a coffee can. Inside the can, marbles rattled whenever Earl moved. But going through Senny was becoming a chore. Earl looked past her to a large, round woman in a print dress, my mom. She looked at the boy and then yelled up the stairs in Spanish. Go and play, Grillo, she said. You stay in the attic all the time. Go and play. Be like other boys. Yeah. Yeah!
Once more with feeling.
Earl waited patiently as the Rodriguez household quaked and quavered, trying to get me downstairs and into the yard. Finally, I came down. Earl smiled broadly and offered me the can of marbles. This is for taking the rap today, man. I looked hard at him, still a little peeved, then reached out for the can and held the best marble collection I had ever seen. I made a friend.
Aw, I love that.
Nice. Okay, so his first friend is Earl.
Yep.
Thanks a lot, Earl. Well, I guess that's one of his first friends. So there was Earl, and then what's Jaime?
Jaime, yeah.
One-armed Jaime. All right. Desert winds swept past the TV antennas and peeling fences, welcome breezes on sweltering dry summer days when people came out to sit on their porches or beneath a tree in dirt yards or to fix cars in the street. But on those days, the perils came out too. You could see it in the faces of street warriors, in the play of children, too innocent to know what lurked about, but often the first to fall during a gang war or family scuffle. 103rd Street was particularly hard. It was the main drag on Watts, where most of the businesses were located, and it was usually crowded with people, including dudes who took whatever small change one might have in their pocket. On days like that, Reno, Jaime, Earl, and I ventured out to 3rd, as 103rd Street was called, or by the factories and railroad tracks playing dirt war with other kids. Other times we played on the rooftop and told stories. Did you ever hear the one about the half man? Earl asked. The what? Jaime replied. What's a half man? Well, he's a dude who got cut in half at the railroad tracks over there by Dogtown. Yeah, go on. So now he haunts the streets, half of him one place, the other half in another place. And he eats kids, of course. Man, that's sick, Reno said. But I got one for you. It's about El P. Spelled like pie. What the hell is that? P means foot in Spanish. And that's all it is. One big foot walking around. These kids. Gusts of wind swirled around the avocado tree branches, and the moonlight cast uncanny shadows near where he related our tales. And you heard about La Llorona, right? Reno continued.
I thought it was La Llorona.
La Llorona? Oh, yeah, sure. She's an old Mexican lady. You mean Mrs. Alvarez?
Oh, my God.
We laughed. No, this lady once got all her children and cut them up into tiny pieces. And then she went all over the neighborhood, sprinkling bits of their bodies everywhere. So then God saw what she did and cursed her to walk the world, looking for her children, weeping for all eternity. That's why she's called La Llorona. Yeah, that's pronounced right. La Llorona. The weeping woman.
I just feel like I remember that there being a movie called that,
I think there is.
and I thought it was people at least called it La Llorona. I think.
La, but there's two L's, so in Spanish usually it's
Yeah, but
a Y.
we're uncultured, so.
Yeah, true. La Llorona. And you know what? She picks up other kids to make up for the ones she's killed. The leaves rustled, giving out an eerie sound. All of us jumped, including Reno. Before anyone could say goodnight, we stumbled over one another, trying to get out of there, climbed off the roof, and ran through bed sheets and dresses hanging on a line, dashing like mad as we made our way home. That's funny. Tough guys, huh?
Totally tough.
Mm-hmm. We changed houses often because of evictions. Here we go. Dad's back in the picture. My dad constantly tried to get better work. He tried so many things. Although he was trained as a teacher, graduated with a degree in biology, and had published Spanish textbooks in Mexico. In Los Angeles, everyone failed to recognize his credentials. In Los Angeles, he was often no more than a laborer. One day, a miracle happened. My dad obtained a substitute teaching job in the San Fernando Valley at Taft High School in Woodland Hills, teaching Spanish to well-off white children. Oh, that's great.
That was right down the street from where I lived.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Woodland Hills was right around the corner where I last lived before moving out here.
Yeah, very nice.
Mm-hmm. My dad must have thought we had struck oil or something. He bought a house in Reseda.
Oh, God.
Uh-huh. In those days, this made us the only Mexican family around. It was a big house. It had 3 bedrooms, which meant the boys could have their own room, the girls theirs, and my parents could be alone. It had 2 baths, a large grassy yard, and an upstanding stucco garage. I went to a school on Shirley Avenue, which actually had books. I remember being chased back home a lot by the Anglo kids, but we were so glad to be in Reseda, so glad to be away from South Central Los Angeles. Sounds like they got a foot up. Even my brother enjoyed success in this environment. He became the best fighter in the school, all that he went through in Watts finally amounting to something. The big white kids tried to pick on him, and he fought back, hammered their faces with quick hands in street style, after which nobody wanted to mess with him. Soon the bullies stopped chasing me home when they found out I was Jose's brother. My dad went nuts in Reseda. He bought new furniture, a new TV, and he had the gall to throw away the old black and white box we had in Watts. He bought a new car. He was like a starving man in a candy store, partaking of everything, touching whatever he couldn't eat. He sat on a mountain of debt. But his attitude was, who cares? We were Americans now. We were on our way to having a little bit of that dream. He was even doing it as a teacher, what he was trained for. Oh, what a time it was for my father. Just a little bit of taste of the glory.
Yeah.
See what it tastes like.
Yeah, you get a little taste and then you just like go really hard to it. Like you said, like a starving man in a candy store.
Yep.
Or usually it's a fat kid in a candy store. But yeah, you just get a
man.
little taste and then you just, it sounds like he went a little too hard.
Yeah, I think so. I got a little excited.
And it's probably going to come back and haunt them later.
Mm-hmm. My mother, I could tell, was uncomfortable with the whole setup. She shied away from the neighbors. The other mothers around here were good looking, fit, and well built. My pudgy mom looked dark, Indian, and foreign, no matter what money could buy. Except she got her false teeth. It seemed Mama was just here to pick up the pieces of my father's house if cards fell. She knew it would. When it happened fast, decisively. It turned out Taft High School hired my father to teach Spanish on a temporary basis.
There it is.
Deep sigh here. Apparently, the white kids couldn't understand him because of his accent. He wrote letters to the school board proposing new methods of teaching Spanish to the American children so he could keep working. They turned them down, and Taft High School let him go. We weren't in Reseda very long, less than a school year. Then the furniture store trucks pulled into the driveway to take back the new sofas, the washing machine, the refrigerator, and even the TV. A for sale sign jabbed into the front lawn. The new car had been repossessed. We pulled out of Reseda in an old beat-up Dodge. Sad faces on our neighbors were our farewell. I suppose they realized we weren't so bad for being Mexican. We were going back to an old friend. Pobreza.
Got it. That means...
Pobreza. Man, that really didn't last very long.
No, that's really poverty.
All right, poverty, their old friend.
Oh.
We moved in with Senny, her husband, and their 2 daughters. They were then occupying an apartment just outside East Los Angeles. Senny's girls were about the same age as me, my brother and sisters, although we were their uncles and aunts. They also had nicknames. Anna Senny was called Pimpos, which doesn't mean anything I know of. But Reno called her Beanhead. And that took. Heidi was called La Banana because as a baby she had shades of blonde hair. They later had another daughter named Becca, also Guerrita, which we'll find out what that means here in a moment.
A little blonde girl or light-skinned girl.
Okay. You know what's funny is in a lot of Hispanic families, there's always at least one that could pass as like a white kid. Yeah, as a Caucasian kid.
Yeah, I discovered that too, especially out in LA specifically when I was living out there, that there was one girl specifically in one of my classes and blonde hair, blue eyes and stuff, and then she told me she was Hispanic and I was just like, I was like, they're not. And she was like, yeah, I am. I was like, okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep, there's one in every family. Like most Latinos, we had a mixture of blood. My half-brother Alberto looked Caribbean. His mother came from Veracruz on the Caribbean side of Mexico, which has the touch of Africa. The rest of us had different shades of Spanish white to Indian brown. Uprooted again, we stuffed our things in a garage. The adults occupied the only 2 bedrooms. The children slept on makeshift bedding on the living room. My grandmother, Catita, also stayed with us. There were 11 of us crushed into that place. I remember the constant fighting. My dad was dumped on for not finding work. Senny accused her husband of having affairs with other women. Mama often stood outside alone, crying, or in the garage next to all our things piled on top of each other. Reno and I sought refuge in the street. So here we go. Refuge in the street. So, obviously home life isn't great. They don't want to be home. They're going to look for, some sort of retribution, I guess, in the streets. And safety in the streets. Home isn't safe. Yeah. Home isn't safe here with family. Where can we go to find either solace
or companionship?
Or companionship, whatever they're looking for, it's going to be here in the street. One night, we came home late after having stocked up on licorice and bubblegum. We walked past police cars and an ambulance. Colored lights whirled across the tense faces of neighbors who stood on patches of grass and driveway. I pushed through low voices and entered the house. Blood was splattered on a far wall. Who's it going to be? Moments before, Senny had been brushing Pimpo's hair when, who knows why, she pulled at the long sections. The girl's screams brought in my sister's husband. An argument ensued. Vicious words. Accusations. Senny then plucked a fingernail file from the bathroom sink. She flashed it in front of my brother-in-law's face. He grabbed for her hand. The nail file plunged into his arm. Mom and Dad rushed in, ramming my sister against the wall. Nail file crashed steely bright onto the linoleum floor. Soon after the incident, the landlord evicted us all. This was when my mother and father broke up. And so we began that car ride to the train station on the way back to Mexico, leaving LA, perhaps never to come back.
God.
Ooh. Okay, so they're out of there. They're on their way back to Mexico, perhaps leaving LA for good. Let's see what happens next in the last page and a half before the end of chapter. We pull into a parking lot at the Union Station. It's like a point of no return. My father is still making his stand. Mama looks exhausted. We continue to sit in our seats, quiet now as Dad maneuvers into an empty space. Then we work our way out of the car, straightening our coats, gathering up boxes and taped over paper bags. Our luggage. Up to this juncture, it's been like being in a storm. So much instability of dreams achieved and then shattered, of a silence within the walls of my body, of being turned on, beaten, belittled, and pushed aside, forgotten and unimportant. I have no position on the issue before us. To stay in LA, to go, what does it matter? I've been a red-hot ball, bouncing around from here to there. Anyone can bounce me. Mama, Dad, Reno, schools, streets. I'm a ball. Whatever. We are inside the vast cavern of the station. Pews of swirled wood are filled with people. We sit with our bags near us and a string tied from the bags to our wrists so nobody can take them without taking us too. My father turns to us, says a faint goodbye, then begins to walk away. No hugs. He doesn't even look at us. Pancho, The name echoes through the waiting area. Pancho! He turns, stares at my mother. The wet of tears covers her face. Mama then says she can't go. She will stay with him. In L.A.? Or, sorry, excuse me, jeez. I thought that was a period there.
No, it is.
Oh, yeah, it is. She will stay with him. In L.A. I don't think she's happy about this, but what can a single mother of 4 children do in Mexico? A woman, sick all the time, with factory work for skills in a land where work is mainly with the soil. What good is it except to starve? Está bien, Dad says as he nears my mother. We will make it, mujer. I know it, but we have to be patient. We have to believe. Mama turns to us and announces we are not leaving. I'm just a ball, bouncing outside, bouncing inside, whatever.
A lot of instability, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But so it sounds like the parents didn't end up breaking up. It was just like a one-off, like it doesn't sound like they're staying together for love by
Right.
any means, but it's more like, well, what the hell am I gonna do without you? Like, the option ain't great for me, so I guess I'm gonna stay.
Staying for the children, staying for some sort of stability, because they can't make it
Or hope for
without it.
stability,
Yeah,
at
or
least.
hope for stability. They can't make it out there on their own.
No.
So they really have just each other to keep each other afloat. Until the kids grow up, then maybe they can, start pitching in and helping.
Yep. But one thing that,
rough.
Yeah, definitely rough. And I know we're already past our hour, so we should wrap up here shortly. But one thing that I was taking note of, just like throughout that first chapter, is there was a lot of symbols of death that were just sprinkled throughout. Like, I mean, you got on the first page with cars passing like ghosts, and even the second page on the mother crying in a tomb-like place, and then followed very shortly after about the photo of his half-sister Lisa.
Yep.
In her casket.
Which also is kind of like a they used to do that. Like, even here in America, they would take pictures of like their dead, like children.
In a casket?
Yeah, they would, like, if their children died young, they would dress them up and then they would stage their body, sometimes even sitting with them, or maybe even just alone, and they would take a photo of the dead body just as a keepsake.
Yes.
So it's like an old way of thinking. This is like we assume it's 1980s at this point, maybe 1970, late 1970, early 1980s. And they're still doing that as a keepsake. Like, that's, it was a timely thing at one point. The Wild West, they would do that. They would stage their dead bodies and take photos with them or of them. But you don't really do that so much anymore in like the 1970s, 1980s. At least not that I'm aware of. But that feels like, it was a timely thing at one point, and now it's something that I think maybe now maybe it's something you do in Mexico, or it's a status thing. Like, I don't know what it is. We're that
it could be cultural.
Keeping that tradition, like, in the culture.
Well, I mean, also too,
it's not even just a cultural thing. Americans did it too.
Well, okay, so actually one thing as well, because I have seen that, not personally with anybody I know, but specifically with like a newborn or whatever that like only lasted a day or two, or was born a stillborn. I've seen that. They never, at least from my memory or what I wrote down, they never said how old Lisa was. It was just, she was a child, basically. That's all you get from it. It was a child. That's very ambiguous. That could mean anything between being an infant. I don't think so, but I can look.
I thought they said she was 4 years old.
Did they? Okay.
I thought, because remember, she was. Didn't she she didn't choke? What was
another half sister Lisa died as an infant after she accidentally ate some chicharrones my father was forced to sell in cobblestone. Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't give a specific age.
Yeah. Just she was very young, just infant, whatever that means. That could be like anywhere between 1 to 3, I think.
I think so.
Because I think after 3 you turn into a toddler. I think that's what it is. Whatever. It doesn't matter. But either way, so just like going back into like, there's a lot of symbols of
Mhm.
death, especially because he brings up blood a good amount. And then specifically though, and I mean, I know this is also a big thing in Mexican culture, is symbols of ghosts.
Right.
So I mean, obviously I already said we got the cars passing like ghosts, but we also got the cultures of La Llorona. I'm just gonna
Mhm.
say it that way because I'm not cultured. And then also the half man.
Right.
In the foot, but that was
Yeah.
nothing. But there's obviously like there's an interest in the supernatural.
Mhm. Oh, big time. Yep.
In Latino and Hispanic cultures. And so seeing a lot of that permeate into this first chapter is really interesting to me. I'm interested to see how that develops a little bit more.
Mhm.
But the way he also talks about death, especially with like the sister and stuff, and also just like with some imagery that he uses, it seems to be almost like somewhat a peaceful idea. It's almost like kind of like a companion that's sitting next to him constantly, is this idea of death.
Yeah.
So it's almost like that's his first friend that we're already experiencing from a young age.
Yeah, for sure. And whether it's, again, that's a cultural thing too. They have the Day of the Dead that they celebrate.
And then there's
But we haven't seen an instance, or at least, we don't know if that's something that is being taught to them right now. Like if they do celebrate that as they're growing up. I don't know if we'll see that in the next couple chapters. But is that already being taught to them, that death is kind of just a part of life and it's supposed to be celebrated and whatever. Because you're right, there is a lot of death surrounding them, or the ideas of death and imagery of death surrounding them, like as he's growing up.
Yeah.
And it feels like maybe he did that on purpose in his writing, because that is a celebrated thing.
Yeah, and especially because also within gangs and cartels and all that stuff, I know Santa Muerte, that religion is really very, very popular because it's not necessarily a fear of death. It's just the mother of death is going to come for you, and she's the saint of death. And it's supposed to. They argue with a branch of Catholicism, but I'm pretty sure the Catholic Church has said definitely not. But so whatever. I mean, that's to be argued, but I'd be curious to see if he gets into that at all in a later time. Especially because even on the book itself,
I can't tell. I
mean, it isn't Santa Muerte because she has a skull face, but I mean, if you want to hold it up for the camera.
Yeah, I was gonna say, religion. If you haven't already seen the cover, religion's a very big part.
And it looks like Mary on the back of his back.
It is Mary. Yeah.
So, which Santa Muerte is supposed to be another form of Mary.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm curious to see how these death symbols continue to populate and how they grow into this book, because obviously when you become a gang member, especially, there's going to be a lot of death around him.
Yeah, I also never really looked at this image, but he's got the rosary around Mary as well.
Yes.
That chain, or that necklace piece. But, well, I guess we'll see. So he's surrounded by death, already, whether he knows it or not, and imagery and symbols of death. So far life has been pretty bad for him and his family. They had a bout of good luck for a moment when his father took that substitute teacher job, or the temporary teaching job. Life is either going to go up and change for them, or it's going to continue down this, what seems like a downward spiral.
It's bouncing like a ball, it seems like right now.
Bouncing like a ball. He's up, he's down. He's up, he's down. Well, I guess next time we'll find out what that means for Luis and Reno and Mama, and I can't remember what, Pancho. Pancho's dad.
Pancho, I guess, yeah.
His father, and I guess the rest of his family too, because I don't know how big of a part the rest of his family plays in the next bit of his life. But he's finding solace in the street already. Yeah. So life is going to change again pretty quickly for him, I think.
Yes.
But thank you guys for joining us on this first episode of Sunday Brunch Book Club. Next time I think we'll probably have brunch. We'll eat while we're reading. I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if I
Play it
want
as it
to
goes.
if I'm gonna be munching into the microphone while I'm
Got some
while
ASMR
we're
going on.
reading. Yeah, right. Exactly. But maybe I'll eat because next time you're gonna read.
Yes.
I think that's fair. All right, guys. Again, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this first episode and this reading of the book. I know it was a little choppy.
You did great.
Thanks. We'll see you guys next time.